Hey everyone, Attorney Davis Younts here. This year for the 4th of July, we wanted to do a short 5 video series. We're just going to talk about different elements of the way we think about this holiday, both as Americans and Christians, and how that impacts the way we celebrate. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel and to our social media this week as we begin to think about how we celebrate this holiday well, and check out our video series. Thanks. Take care. Hey everyone, Attorney Davis Younts here. Listen, we're doing a series of kind of 5 days talking about different aspects of the 4th of July, why we celebrate, and how we should be thinking about this holiday as Christians, especially with everything else that's going on in the world. So what I wanted to do in day one is I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes and talk about some basic things that the founding fathers believed. So what did they believe and how did it influence their decision making? We're going to get into some other aspects later in this series. Just war theory, were they right? We're going to talk about things like what happened to the founders and how that should influence us today. But to start out, I just want to talk about some of the things they believed. And I want us to understand that very carefully. So it's important when we think about the founders, we think about the Declaration of Independence, we think about what was the air they breathed, what was the water they swim in, what was influencing their thought process. And there's a couple of things we know that they were influenced by. Obviously, there were some philosophical underpinnings. They read a lot of Montesquieu, but ultimately these were men who, if they were not individually Christians, were informed by the Christian faith and were informed having been raised in a society and a scenario where one of the primary books they were reading constantly throughout their life was the Bible. So regardless of whether they leaned deist or they themselves may not have been a born-again believer, they were greatly influenced by the Bible, and they were greatly influenced by Christian thought and traditional Reformed Christian teaching on the Bible. So we know that, we understand that about it, and then we can see it in their actions and what they did. So I just want you to think about a couple of things as you think about the 4th of July and we think about the Declaration of Independence. So one of the things I want to think about is just think about how we have this concept where they talk about the fact that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. This gives us a perspective on God's sovereignty as the source of human dignity and liberty. So think about that. Not only are they recognizing that God actually does care about and intervene in human affairs, but they're saying that there is a source, that God's sovereignty is the source for human dignity and liberty. That's critically important. That's why they started out the Declaration this way, and that's why it's rooted in a higher moral law. So we have a concept. It's not a concept we always talk about today. You may not have heard of it in school, but it's a concept called lex rex. Literally, that's this idea that the law is king. So the founders, when they're talking about the creator, and that humans gain their dignity and liberty from God, the creator, they're also talking about and recognizing that there is a higher moral law. There's something that stands above a king, and that's where lex rex comes from. So that phrase is attributed to Samuel Rutherford. He was a Scottish Presbyterian minister who wrote a lot on that subject. There's a famous book from 1644 where he literally says, lex rex, the law is king, meaning the king is subject to the law. And in the case of the founders truly believed that meant a king was subject to the law of God. Now, we could have a longer debate about biblical law versus natural law. We could have a discussion about Thomas Aquinas. We could discuss all those things in more detail. But for our purposes here, just to keep it kind of straightforward and simple, what's important to know about the Declaration of Independence and the founding of this nation is, even if not all of the founders were right with God in their own sense, they were informed by, they were inspired by, and they were looking to God's law, scripture, and recognizing a creator God informing our nation. So as you begin to think about the 4th of July holiday, you begin to think about what it means to be an American. Just recognize and understand this is a nation that was founded by men and women who believed in God, in God's law. They believed in a creator, and they believed that that was the moral standard. That was the foundation for everything. And that's what we should be looking to. So when you read the Declaration of Independence, do that with your families this week. Take the time to actually read it, but pause and think about what it means and the values that informed individuals who are forming a new nation, potentially, in declaring their independence and writing those words that all men are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And when you do that, I think it will give you a perspective of respect and just humble gratitude that that was the founding principle that these men were looking to when they started our nation. Thanks. Take care.